Hello, everyone. This is A4LE Association Days 2021, and it's their digital conference. And there are three groups that are presenting here today: Agua Fria Union High School, District 216, DLR Group, and InSync, Education Design, Research and Design. This presentation is titled MacConnell Award-Winning Architecture Design Shares What It Took to Get There. And we have a panel that I think you'll find very enlivened and excited about sharing this vision to measured results. It's my absolute pleasure to be able to not only have you meet the panel, but kind of sort of be on the panel myself. Dr. Dennis Runyon is the superintendent of Agua Fria Union High School District and absolute visionary for education and what education future for both the educator and student can be. Pam Laufelman, an amazing architect with the K-12 education leader with DLR Group, who again knows how to take those visions and make them happen. Longtime friend and colleague, and delighted to have her here on the panel. Marilyn Dennison, Dr. Marilyn Dennison, lots of doctors on this panel here. She is an educational planner with DLR Group, but with many, many years experience as an awesome educator and assistant superintendent. And again, delighted to have her not only join DLR Group to make a difference in architectural education, but also to share her wisdom here today. I'm Lenny Scott Weber, Dr. Lenny, as my students would call me. I'm the owner and principal of InSync Education, Research, and Design. It's my absolute mission, I guess, in life to really try to show how the design of the built environment impacts learning. We had a couple of things that I think are important to share with our abstract in terms of some excerpts. Again, it was a MacConnell award-winning project for 2019. And the premise that the jurors really thought was important was it was blurring the lines between ages and abilities and fostering authentic learning and curriculum exploration by expanding the definition of what a place-based high school could be. Since the school opened, leaders have had a very clear intrinsic motivation for students to use the abundance of technology, but we're thinking about it also as analog and digital. So it means you have to have the ability to use your kinesthetic senses and write in order to get that information into the cognitive learning components of your brain. It's a visual learning environment. The teacher is a metaphorically similar to an artist painting a colorful, almost endless mural than planning a linear focus as content. I think that is such a future focused vision, and one hopes that if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, you take that away because it's so huge. There are key pillars for learning in these schools, and a common intentional language, a collective for all stakeholders in the planning, and high levels of student-peer collaboration, which has led to an ownership of the learning together from both the faculty, the staff, and the students. The learners and educators are thriving in this educational environment because it's supporting the abilities for building relationships, that all-important community connection, and providing for socialization and supporting creativity. It took a village. DLR Group won a lot of awards, but without the vision, I would argue, of Dr. Runyon and his staff, it wouldn't have happened. And so all of the pieces came together in this amazing, which we're going to be so excited to share with you. And again, I had the privilege of coming in and doing the post-occupancy evaluation, as well as doing a chapter and write-up for an entire case study for this particular project. We had really high statistical significance with a p-value of 0.001. That's a really good thing. And that the research shows that engagement, the time and energy students devote to educational purposeful activities, is the best single predictor of their learning and personal development over time. We don't measure grades. We measure the engagement it takes to higher performance. And now I'd like Dr. Runyon, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself a little bit and sharing your story. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you today. And this is a wonderful journey we're about to embark on, and I'm sure you're going to find this information most helpful. It has for us. It's been life-altering professionally, and we're excited to be here today. I began my career in education about 34 years ago. I had been a journalist before that for a few years, and I worked 12 years in the state of Florida. I was an administrator in Lee County Schools. as well as a teacher. I taught English and journalism. Coach soccer, you got to get that in there, of course. And then from that point, I became a middle school administrator and then a high school administrator in curriculum, and then moved on. I moved to Delaware in about 2001 and was principal at Mount Pleasant High School in Wilmington. At one point in 2003, I had the opportunity to come out to Millennium High School here in Arizona and became principal for 6 years before moving into the superintendency 12 years ago. And I've been in that role. So this project, which we're excited to share with you, started in 2016 after the 2015 bond. But we'll get to that in just a minute after we introduce everyone else. I have a quick video here I want to show you again, and we'll run through that with you. So this is a little background on the project.
As we look at the landscape of education today, we realize that it's changing. So we were very intentional about the work for college and career readiness. This campus models the opportunity for students that are preparing for both worlds. So whether you're going to go straight into the workforce, whether you're going to go to college, this campus is designed to be supportive.
I think Canyon View really represents an incredible precedence and benchmark for the country. It celebrates the individuality of each student, but without sacrificing any of the rigor that's really required for a high school education today.
We've got a ton of diversity here at Canyon View High School. It's an interesting dichotomy between all of our students on campus, what they do, what they're involved in. We don't have any closed spaces. I tell our teachers all the time, if you're coming to a school where you can go into your classroom, close the door, teach for 8 hours, and then leave, that's not going to happen here. Our students and our teachers interact with each other so much because of the structure of the forts and the structure of the agora and the open spaces. You're going to be around different people and you're going to engage with them.
This agora is a wonderful space. We've got 100,000 square feet of space here.
Through the design process, we discovered a science called alesthesia. What we realized was it is important that we design a space that has different thermal environments, and we have several different spaces that show a variety of design features that achieve that comfort level of 85 degrees.
It was really an opportunity to leverage space in a different way. Think about when you were a young child playing with your neighbors or your family. You wanted to build a fort. You grabbed some blankets, you grabbed some couch cushions and some pillows, and you made something in that moment. That's what we wanted this place to be. We wanted to be something in the moment.
And now, Pam, if you'd like to share the story from the expert's point of view and the architectural process.
Thanks, Lenny. So Pam Leffelman, senior principal with DLR Group. And, you know, I think what was really exciting about this whole process is I've long felt that practice informs policy and policy informs practice. And being able to really work with folks like Dennis, Lenny, Marilyn, really added a whole new component, that kind of research informed component that really started to push the edges, expanding the conversation of how data-driven, research-informed processes really start to create a much richer dialogue and stronger outcomes. I think in the visioning process, there was we had over 250 meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of workshops on with students, with teachers, with the community, with everyone, to really start to develop that both macro vision and then also diving deeper. So when you start to look and think about some of the tenets, there were a number of them. There really was, the making sure this was a community research resource, and how important it was to really have all of the leadership from the community to be part of the vision, so that they could really see it and believe it and help generate that new reality. So a lot of buy-in. But that buy-in was always driven by that North Star or the educational vision. I think a lot of times we as architects don't actively listen to understand as much as we should. I think in the case of the team on Canyon View, it was really quite magical because we really all started to kind of leverage each other's experiences and visions for a much greater end result. We focused on really designing the activities and the functions as opposed to just the spaces. I think that's really important when one wants to start to blur the edges. If you have lots of walls that are creating edges, you're just not going to be able to accomplish where you're reaching for. Also, a lot of conversations about teaching methods and curriculum and the evolving nature of that. We're actually going to end with a little bit of a conversation about what that means in 2022, because Dr. Runyon's vision was always that this school needed to be flexible and agile and positioned for the future. And at the end of the day, the results are starting to be in from the first year to the second year to the third year. And it will be exciting in terms of the senior class, if you will be graduating, the first graduating class. And so a lot of lessons learned. But let's go back to the beginning. So when we talked about the overall campus plan, was very intentional. I won't go into all of the funding realities that ultimately led to being able to build out the entire campus, but it definitely was a conscious decision to create this as a campus and to, in fact, really create that agora that you heard in the video is over 100,000 square feet. That is really the glue that ties this place and space together. So I don't know, Dr. Runyon, if you want to add a comment here.
A couple things. The beginning of this, the blank slate before this emerged was wonderful because we weren't there to replicate, we were there to innovate. And I distinctly remember the first meeting with DLR and the group, and we brought in many stakeholders. As Pam said, there were over 200 meetings, and that was just getting the project off the ground. That included community, teachers, students. And one of the things just to mention here, based on what Pam is sharing, we did have that financial piece where the state had said, you know, you have to utilize every square foot of your campus space. It's all educational. The state of Arizona at the time was just coming out of some difficult financial times. And so the way they were measuring square footage was a little bit political, you know, common spaces, lobbies. They were saying, oh no, that's educational space. Well, we took it to heart. And you'll see as you go through this process that every inch of this is either collection spaces, innovative spaces, pliable spaces. It's truly a campus that every square foot is approachable.
So within the overall campus component, I think there were two areas that were of really specific focus and deeper dives that are quite extraordinary. The first is the accelerator white box, and then the second is really the forts that you heard Jason talk about in the video. But with the accelerator white box, Dr. Runyon really felt strongly, you know, he just talked about that financial piece and how do you make lemonade out of lemons in making sure that every square foot is a usable square foot. So we programmed over 76 different functions that could occur in a innovative kind of theater white box, which is another way of saying oversized lobby, extension of the theater, connector to the learning stair. And as a result, there really is this place and space that is lively and active, I think almost 24/7. I don't know, Dr. Runyon, if you can add to that.
Absolutely, Pam. This is just an incredible feature of this campus. And you'll see it was used in so many ways already in the first few years. But you have, again, pliable spaces. Just quickly, if I could share a few things. The bleachers there in the traditional auditorium, the upper level can be removed and used in the white box that can be used in the courtyard. We call it affectionately Times Square, which is an indoor-outdoor egress. The learning stairs there in the yellow. It's just an incredibly dynamic space that is every bit of what we thought it would become. And you don't see it on here, but on the other side, there's a small cafe, an area. So if you're doing staff development, if you're bringing in outside groups, they can come in the morning and then they can transcend into these spaces. I don't have time today, but as you learn or look at this, if you come out for a visit, this is utilized. The time study that DLR did showed that traditional auditorium spaces and areas like this are used about 17 to 20% of the time. This is utilized about 50% of the time in terms of the daily access. And this is developed too for the community to be able to come in and use it. There's at the bottom of your frame there is a public entrance, which you can square off and keep the students in action on the campus while you have activities and groups and clubs and functions going on that the community would like access to. So it's truly, truly a dynamic space. And it was a special request. It was kind of that North Star piece for me, that we wanted that to be a community. And they call part of this the Agora that runs through the campus.
So you can see here some visuals of that learning stair, the white box in the upper right, and then kind of the theater proper. It really is a diverse collection of spaces, but it also is a coherent whole for those larger scale activities when the school wants to host, 1,500 people. It really functions quite wonderfully with the IT connections from place to place.
Pam, could I share one more quick thing on the?
Of course.
I get so excited about all this. It's a dream come true. But we talked a lot about teacher staff development and recruitment, and what do teachers need to have, high quality staff development. We talked about the fact that we send teachers to conferences all over the country, but we can only afford to send maybe 5 to 10 teachers to a major conference. We wanted this to be a space that the teachers would come and utilize and feel and experience a first-class staff development opportunity. We wanted them to say, this is highly attractive to me professionally. What does it look like in the private sector? What does it look like in corporate America? And we spent a lot of time studying that and traveling and learning about what do those training spaces professionals look like. And I believe we've captured in this some of that, and we are very proud of that as well. It's a go-to spot for us as a district for our staff development and teacher training and our community organizations.
Awesome, that's a great point, and I know Marilyn's going to talk a little bit more about staff development in a second. So if we start to talk about the forts, they, you can see, are located, if you will, on the north side of the overall campus, these little circles. A lot of conversation about the overall zoning of the campus that, if you will, separated, if you will, the pure academic functions along the north, and then the more public functions that would allow direct access and or security in off hours to allow the school to use this in, in multiple ways. So when we start to zone in on these little circles and look at the diagram of how it's laid out, you start to see really, a physical manifestation of blurring the boundaries of teaching and learning. So these lots of movable walls, some acoustical drapes that actually work amazingly well, that really allow the space to be configured in multiple ways to really allow for those small, medium, and large groups to interact in lots and lots and lots of different ways. I think the amazing thing when we start to look at the pictures of how this was built out is really also the kind of confidence of the school in really saying, well, not only will there not be own classrooms, but classrooms and students are going to rotate from place to place and really, really demonstrate, really, really leverage, if you will, how architecture can enable, it can inform, it can help teachers to provide different experiences for students, and then also through providing those different experiences, keeping their delivery of curriculum fresh. And Dr. Runyon, of course you need to add to that, because that's not an easy task to do.
Right, and the principal, Philip, our due gratitude to Philip for making these spaces come alive along with Marilyn, and you'll be learning shortly about the bold training that was necessary. But teachers did not own their spaces. They weekly planned together to collaborate on how they'll rotate through spaces. There are a couple anchors in each fort. There's a maker space and a wet lab, and the restrooms there to the left you can't see, but it's another interesting feature that each fort has its own restroom area so that the students aren't wandering. The students take tremendous ownership in these spaces. They're really amazing to watch. They do tours. The people come in and they're more than comfortable. The other thing, for many of you that are traditional practitioners or perhaps looking at design, we learned, I heard Pam talk about, space is a tool. Space is a tool. What does that really mean? Well, through this experience, I learned that space truly can be a tool, and it can be adaptable to the learning environments that you're finding yourself. And so it's super dynamic. There have been times where we allowed the kids to set up the structure of some of this and to participate in that. Traditionally when I came up, oh no, you didn't do that. You were kind of in this kind of mold where kids had to be focused and move to space. Well, this is a whole different experience, and a highly, highly successful experience where you have that dynamic vision and you have the planning by the teachers. And while they don't technically own the space, they take ownership in other ways that's really beautiful to see.
When you think about this being such a dynamic space, both students and educators have been preconditions. We call it in environment behavior psychology, sort of behavioral conditioning. In other words, it goes back to Pavlov's dog. You know when you open the door, if it's row by column seating, exactly the kind of behavior you're expected of you as a student and as an educator. And so when you open the door to give permission to do something else, not only has the architecture allowed that, but all of the thinking about what are the kinds of movement, what type of affordances in terms of seating, in terms of lounge, in terms of writing. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, you can see where people are writing on the vertical whiteboards. All of that supports a sensory movement and connection. And just the simple act of standing up, being allowed to stand up, actually creates a chute of oxygen to the brain, which then is a novelty component and allows the brain to start to refocus again. So all of these pieces have been extremely thoughtfully put together in the way the experience will roll out. And so I'm so happy to hear that you're really beginning to think about space as a tool, because it is just like a technology. We know what to do with that. But now these educators and these students are given permission, which is another cultural attribute of what you've provided. They've been given permission to do something different, and they do it naturally now because they know it works and they know how happy they are to stay connected and motivated. And I think Marilyn's going to share with us a little bit about how that can really be made very formalized and part of a process to think through. Marilyn?
Great, thanks, Lenny. I am Marilyn Dennison, and I'm a 25-year educator. I started out as a teacher and finished as the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, and I had all those roles in between. And then I joined DLR Group as their teaching and learning designer. So I get to work with districts like here with Canyon View and Dennis Runyon, and this great passion and this desire to innovate is so much fun to work with people like this. It's a great opportunity. So I am now helping to lead the educational research team for K-12 at DLR Group, but also to help lead BOLD. BOLD. What do you think that is? Okay, so BOLD is, I'm glad you asked. BOLD is a professional development and educational alignment system. We call it organizational change process that DLR Group offers. Because you heard these great things that Dr. Runyon was talking about, these forts and teachers not owning the space. How do you make that happen? You heard about the different utilization of space indoors and outdoors, and maybe even thinking about how the learning cycle works and how this space as a tool adapts to the need of the learning at the time, whether it's a curtain or it's changing the space size or it's moving the furniture to adapt to the learning needs at that time. How do you make that happen? Well, it is through the BOLD service. So BOLD stands for Bridging the Organization, the Learning, and the Design. So it's not going in and really building a school and saying, well, we hope this works. It's really looking at the passion and the vision that the school district really wants, what Dr. Runyon was really looking at for innovating teaching and learning, and then allowing the design then to help inform that. So it does become a tool for the teaching and learning. So we're looking at your vision for teaching and learning, and then we're looking at all the systems that you have in place to help align all of that. And then we really work with that design also to let that be that support. So this is what our process looks like for BOLD. Within each of these components, these 5 steps, there are many different activities that we do to help bring out the information that we need and to create the documentation to help align those systems. So you start look at, those drivers of change. Well, COVID was a huge one. And you can hear at the end a little bit how COVID has impacted Canyon View and what they're going to do moving forward. We also look at your preferred ideal state. What is it that you do really imagine for the future? Like Dr. Runyon said, it wasn't really replicating. We're not doing what we've always done. We're innovating. What does that look like? What does that imagine? Future ideal state. And then as we get into this defined stage where we're looking at the transformational factors, it's really looking at how does the teaching and learning look? How do we support those expectations? And then what are those practices that we're going to put in line to make sure that we're doing it? How are we going to change spaces weekly? How are we going to do that successfully? How are we going to build that culture and that climate so that we are safe using any space in the classroom or in the school that we want to, and that everybody knows their role in that? And then it's looking at those systems and the procedures that we just do this automatically and it becomes just routine within the district. And of course, looking at the achieve level, looking at those metrics that make sure that we are successful as we are year 1 into the school, year 2, all the way out to year 5, because we know change takes time. So we really look helping to put into place those systems to keep an eye on success and make sure we're heading the right way. Fabulous opportunity to work with Canyon View and to see great teaching and learning happening inside this beautiful facility.
Thanks, Marilyn. So I guess it's my turn. I'm Dr. Lanny Scott Weber, again, of InSync Education Research and Design. I'm a former professor of teaching and learning in design schools, chaired a couple of different design schools, one in Canada and one in the US, and still act as a professional interior designer, but my passion is research. My PhD is in environment behavior psychology, and I wanted to really understand how the environment impacts what we do. And for me as an educator, it was always about learning and learning as it relates to the learner, no matter what age you are, because learning is lifelong. And I've had the privilege of working directly early on, leading the research efforts for DLR Group and moving into a consultancy, more of a consultancy role now, but helping them develop a couple of measuring tools in the engagement indices, a student engagement index and a teacher engagement index, and then also doing a lot of ethnographic research or work as well. But measuring how we look at engagement, which has been proven over and over again to be a really strong indicator of student success across their lifespan. And in fact, it's measured from Gallup polls as well in the work environment. So engagement is a key factor. As an educator, I don't believe in grades. As a design educator, I really don't believe in grades because I see how manipulative they can be. And so I didn't ever want to have a measurement that looked at grades specifically by student. And sometimes we'll look at that overall as an indicator for how things are moving or the trajectory of that. But for us, it's really, and for me personally, it's very much about that engagement factor. I'm about to share with you some of the excerpts from the post-occupancy evaluation we did at Canyon View. And this again is in the peer-reviewed, double-blind, peer-reviewed journal chapter that we did for Learning Environments in Higher Education, published 2021. So these, and the figure numbers are actually just taken right from that publication. For question 1, for you to be actively engaged in your learning, how important is it for you to be able to, again, have this kinesthetic experience, which means movement and body, and being able to bring in information through your sensory output, which is really about, can you transition? Can you move from one place to another? Can you actually move about, meaning, do you have that ability to have that micro movement as much as it is to sort of stand up and move around, to have more of a macro movement? And then is there a modality from teaching that allows you to do more hands-on learning? And what is that choice and control? Can you have that selection of whether you work by yourself in more of an intimate connection, or whether you're working in small group or in a larger groups connection? And of course, collaboration. You'll see in all of these slides, and I just didn't pick these just to show because they look so wonderful statistically, but also because it's pretty much connected with all of the students as well as the teachers' input on the data, and it's very high level. And at this juncture, I can tell you that I've done about probably close to 10,000 students. And so to see this as consistency in one school is not the norm. So I'm very pleased that we had this kind of results. For question 2, how well does the design of the classroom space provide you with the ability to do some of these things? And that's, do you have enough space to work with yourself and with others? Do you have that ability to plug and play and connection to Wi-Fi? Can you hear others? Can you hear the teacher? Can you hear students in small groups? Can you see the presentations? Can you hear the presentations? And can you see others, whether that's the students or the teachers? My early work in the early 90s, when I first started looking at engagement related, there's 4 pillars. You have to be able to see, you have to be able to hear, you have to be comfortable, and you have to feel connected, or learning actually shuts down in terms of connecting with the students. In figure 14, question 3, what is that impact? Can the students actually discern an impact on these different kinds of components? And this is a key factor, because instead of looking at grades, which I said we don't do, it's all about this question. How much impact do you realize the classroom's design has on you, on that motivation to attend? If you don't get there, learning isn't going to happen. So actually getting there and walking through the door is critically important. That you really are motivated to do your best work, and you have a willingness to work hard to actually do that. And one of the motivating factors to actually achieve a higher grade. So that is the key factor to, are my grades going to be higher? I'm going to make sure that I'm engaged because I'm so fully committed to this kind of space and this kind of learning. And learning is an experience. It's not just a sit and get. It's all about owning our own knowledge at the end of the day. And these kinds of places are really, the data is coming out. It really does matter. Question 5, at the end of the school day, how often do you feel that you have contributed to others? It's not just about you as a student or as a learner, but how do you contribute to others as well? Have you been able to study hard? What does that mean to you? Have you felt appreciated by others and by your colleagues as students, but also from your educators and the staff that might be there? And that you've made a good use of your time. So it's not just that you've frittered it away, but you really were much more structured about the way you use time. And did you get the teacher's help that you needed? A critical component of staying on task is knowing that you don't have a fear of asking a question. And students today don't raise their hands. You know, it's not something that they're going to go easily to do. They're going to want to feel that sense of belonging, which is the next piece of that. I felt the sense of belonging in order to understand that I'm appreciated here. I can connect to this school, and they hear me, they listen to me. This slide, I'm not going to go through each one, but again, how much impact does the design of the building space, physical space, have on your? And this is very much about also, the design tells a story. in the world that I look, I often say the building provides you with cues. It provides you with cues as to what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and invites you to do other kinds of things. Look and see the differences at the end in terms of creativity, collaboration, and obviously testing or assessment is, the students recognize that's important, and a sense of belonging to the school's community. There's a few pieces of information here that we also want to also recognize that students and faculty and even board of directors, people that are also part of the community, have recognized how important this is. And maybe Dr. Runyon, you could speak to what this looks like for them.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, for all of those of you that work in education or have supported education, the community is an important component of that. Your board members, we have a comment there from one of our previous board members, as well as an administrator. But I think the quick point to make here is that all stakeholders matter in this process. All are valued partners, all have to be part of the planning and the solutions, as you would probably anticipate that. But I think what I'm trying to point out here is that this has been of the highest unique quality in terms of our experiences. And again, you learn from examples and you learn from non-examples. And over the 34 years I've been in education, I've had a chance to see what coalesces and what innovates and what brings forward that opportunity for innovation. And I think the key point here is that all stakeholders felt that, experienced that, lived through that, and the outcomes are still progressing for us as we move forward.
One of the things you can see is variety of place and placemaking. And when you see this, just in this one slide, look at how many different ways that people feel enabled and are given permission to just move things around, and or choose where they're going to sit, to do different things, stand to do different things. I think it's just such a rich environment. It's fun to see. You can't fake learning and happiness in pictures.
And Lenny, one of the things when we talk about space as tools, and this is a great example, they had asked that I speak a little bit to the COVID experience and what happened at this campus. This campus was by far our strongest campus in terms of adaptability. We were already indoor, outdoor. We already had 6 types of collection areas for students. We already had a high level of technology integrated, both at home as well. And we're a one-to-one district. So this campus had a natural ability to space and utilize these tools. So once again, unbeknownst to us, when the COVID hit, this campus, because it's movable, because it's pliable, because it's built to kind of be able to move with the times, was able to be very adaptive in a very difficult, as you know, environment for all of us. And so just to touch on that, we didn't anticipate that in 2016 when we began the project, but it was a great accelerator, a great proving ground for us that this school, I do believe, is time bound to be innovative for years to come. I remember one of the things we talked about early on, and I'll say this in closing, was I wanted to be able to come back in 10 years, and I wanted the dynamics of this to still be as open-ended, as available, as pliable as a tool as it was the day we built it. And here we are 6 years in, and we had that tremendous event, and it's just an incredible environment. We're struggling because we want to bring this environment to our older campuses, and we're working on projects to open those campuses up. So I'll close with that.
Well, it's been my pleasure again to work with all of you, and thanks, Dr. Runyon, for having that future focus, which is an amazing opportunity for students and for educators, and for the expertise of someone like Pam, who can bring these visions to fruition, and for Marilyn to knowing in your heart that teaching is so critical, and that an active educator can do anything, even with crappy spaces. I'll end with that one. But this is an amazing experience, an amazing event. I encourage you all to go and visit, and thank you all for listening to our story today. Appreciate it.